Good afternoon. We've got lots of folks joining us. It's a great delight to see your faces as you come on board our Equipping the Saints webinar. We are delighted this afternoon to have Reverend Nick Updahl joining us. Reverend Updahl is pastor at Advent Lutheran Church in Madison and is very passionate about many issues I've come to know in a short time. But today he's going to help us think and celebrate Earth Day. We have many things going on in our world, as I know you're all acutely aware. We're waiting on a verdict from the jury in Minneapolis. We have all sorts of concerns going on around that, and prayers being lifted up around that. But Earth Day and climate change, climate justice is also an ongoing concern. And an increasing concern for us. So we're delighted to pause in our day and shift some attention to that. And we're delighted to have Pastor Updahl with us this afternoon. And as we're gathering, I would invite you just into a brief moment of prayer with me. We're going to use just bread for the day today. And today's prayer for Tuesday, April 20th, first a lesson from 2 John verses 1 through 6. Love one another. The elder to the elect lady and her children, who I love in the truth, and not only I, but also all who know the truth, because of the truth that abides in us and will be with us forever. Grace, mercy, and peace will be with us from God the Father, and from Jesus Christ, the Father's Son, in truth and in love. I was overjoyed to find some of your children walking in truth, just as we have been commanded by the Father. But now, dear lady, I ask you, not as though I were writing you a new commandment, but one we have had from the beginning. Let us love one another. And this is love, that we walk according to his commandments. This is the commandment, just as you have heard it from the beginning. You must walk in it. Let us pray. Gracious God, your command is to love one another as you have loved us. Heal us, revive us, come to us like the spring rains, and refresh us with your grace. Give us the will to love wholeheartedly. Amen. And I will now turn it over to Pastor Nick.
Hi, all. I'm going to share some slides with us as a way to start some conversation. So some of what I'm thinking with this is that giving you a little bit of slides from here at Advent Lutheran on the west side of Madison, which is a partner congregation composing Madison Christian Community. I don't want to give the Lutherans all the credit for these things because the UCC is involved too, as well as some broader community help. But showing you a few slides on some framework for some Earth Day things and creation care and new life that's sprouting around us, some Easter promise. I'm hoping that also gives you some thoughts and some connections. Hoping that this is less of a single show and tell and more of a broad celebration. There's a lot about creation care that can feel overwhelming or kind of ominous, that as we think about climate change, we can look at it pretty direly, but maybe being together and thinking about it together, we can celebrate what our congregations or we as individuals are up to. For some framework in this, I'm using a set of 5 categories that came out of the Green Congregation Training Manual. It was something from more than 15 years ago for putting together green teams. Came out of David Rhodes and LSTC, something that then has grown in subsequent years to the group Lutherans Restoring Creation. And so it's a sort of old framework, and I don't even know that it's a pattern that Lutherans Restoring Creation is directly promoting anymore, but it helps to me to gather some of these thoughts. And so the first of their 5 areas, the 5 areas are building and grounds, worship, education, public ministry, and discipleship. And so we'll hit on each of them kind of individually and do some pausing within each one for some examples here on the screen, and then some sharing that you might have and some celebrating together. So building and grounds, I think maybe is some of what we first think of. These are the physical earth care kinds of things. Being out on the land in some sort of nature might be primary for us, and the grounds around our church then as the closest and most direct connection to that getting out in nature. So here are a few MCC things of grounds for you. Again, not as here's the way to do it, but maybe to spur thoughts and help you picture what's around you as well. So on the top left and top center, you see some pictures from gardens here at Advent. And those are pictures of the food pantry gardens, which is communal gardening work. Lots of members from the congregation and others who grow all kinds of things that go to local food pantries and share them. Also around that area, there's some community garden, which are individual plots where people work for themselves and then get to take their own produce home. So a very active tending and stewarding the land in a way that might be pretty common for us to think about with those gardens. Top right, you see prairie burn happening. We've got a prairie restoration that's several decades old, and part of caring for prairies is burning them. We are a little bit on hold right now this year as the DNR has burn restrictions, but looking forward to that in one of these coming days, perhaps. Bottom right, you see some of the newest residents. We had, in my predecessor, Jeff Wild's language, we have 12 to 15,000 new members of the congregation who arrived this last Friday morning. We had a new installation of bees arrive. Last year's hive didn't make it through the really cold stretch we had at the start of February, and so these are ready to go for the season. Bottom center, you see monarch care. You see a milkweed plant that we allow to keep growing as habitat for monarchs. And one of the fun activities the congregation has been doing is bringing in caterpillars and raising them. And I think we released something right around 60 of them last year, trying to help monarch populations. And then in the bottom left, you see Gracie the chicken. She was a member we said goodbye to over the weekend. She was an MCC chicken resident here with us for 9 years, and she came to the end of her life. And with our practice here, when we get to All Saints Sunday, so she was remembered in prayers and celebrated this week with the congregation. And when we get to All Saints Sunday, she'll be named among those saints of the congregation as well. So there's a little glimpse of things there. You might also think about rain gardens and rain barrels. You might think about just ways that you tend property around your church. Last year, as so much was shut down and buildings were closed, we heard more people than ever coming through our grounds and appreciating that chance to be out with nature and to connect and to enjoy the beauty and just find some peace here. The chickens are referred to as our busiest evangelists of the congregation, that more people come to the church because of the chickens than certainly that because of the sermons, I would say. And maybe also thinking of some of the work days that go along with this. This Saturday, we're going to have a work day around on the grounds that is even just things like spreading mulch and doing some weeding. So we'll do a stop share for a moment. And if others of you have thoughts of grounds around your church or ways that your congregation is engaging that, why don't we share some of that?
Feel free to just to unmic yourself or put a question in the chat, and I'll try to keep on top of the chat if you wouldn't mind that help, Nick.
We have a couple of things at All Saints that I am excited about. We also have a community garden that has been there for years. No food pantry, stuff like you have at Advent, but just community gardens. And then the other thing that I'm super excited about is that within the next couple of weeks, hopefully, installation of solar panels will begin on our building.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kristen. We'll get to a little bit more of solar panels on my next slide too.
All right, sorry, jumped the gun.
Not at all, not at all. It's worth celebrating in advance. And you guys are right next to McKee Farm Park, so you've got some of that expanded surroundings that are great too, right?
Yep.
Just a funny little story. Some people are aware that Burke had a major renovation this last year during the pandemic. And one of the things we discovered was that some honeybees had made their ways into the wall of our 120-year-old sanctuary that we had to move across the cemetery. So we had to, we didn't want to disturb them. We wanted to make sure that they as many survived as possible. So we have several pictures of us moving them along with the building, and we got a few stings along the way, and actually keeping it. They actually followed us all the way over, and then we were able to safely extract them out of the building and to a beekeeper here in Token Creek, who is going to, she said it'll probably take a couple years, but we will be having our own holy honey from the church bees that will be coming through our sanctuary here soon.
That's awesome, Rob. It strikes me that they're maybe stereotypical Lutherans because they were resistant to the change, and maybe along with some good hymnody, they were ready to hum along with that, but also that biblical pilgrimage, they're going off to the land of milk and honey.
Yes.
Land of promise.
We're going to be starting at our congregation. We just got our bees, I believe, recently. So very excited about that.
Wow, lots of bees. I'm impressed.
Yeah. And we have a community garden as well that we do.
Which also does some food pantry work, right, Robin?
Yes, yeah. That goes to our food pantry and the food pantry in Verona. And I think there's it built a water runoff garden, I think, yeah, to help with the environment. So
yeah, infiltration and cleaning water and
mm-hmm.
reducing runoff. Yeah.
So hello, Nick. This is David Fremming.
Hi, David.
One of my members in my small country congregation of St. Paul Lutheran Church Burton has a farm, and they're putting 20 acres into the conservatory program of, and they just sowed wild grasses and flowers and it'll be in there, I think, for quite a while, at least a decade, for 10 years. So it'll be a place for wildlife and habitat, 20 acres.
Yeah, very exciting. So we'll loop back to some of that at the end with all of these ways that it ripples out into our lives. And so that's a great snapshot ahead, David, that we can think about little projects that give some good examples in our congregation, but it's all of these much bigger ways that are active out in our world. I'm going to jump back to screen share and keep us moving along to next slide of building. And so again, here are a few Advent things. There are the solar panels up on our roof, and if you want to learn more about that kind of thing, Bob Lindmeyer, whom you might know most as the chief meteorologist from Channel 27 WKOW, he's on our Synod Caring for God's Creation team, and he also just put some in with his council down at St. John's in Oregon, and he's got all kinds of really good connections for you on that. Kristen and All Saints in Fitchburg might be able to help you with it too. A pretty wise thing to do. In simpler levels, down on the lower left there, you see some UFO lights that just got installed here this year, and I'm kind of a lighting geek, and the old lights were inefficient both for use and for energy sucking. We would turn them on and they'd be our highest energy user in the sanctuary there for the whole building, and these are new LED lights, so I'm pretty excited about those, including to be welcoming people back and getting to see them eventually. Top right, you see a coffee pot, and I wasn't sure whether to put this slide with worship or with building and grounds, but the coffee grounds pun was enough for me. So there's coffee pot with a reusable mug and a compost can next to it. And then on the bottom, you see my bike at a bike rack. And so even having the bike rack is an important thing to me to see in a church. Often that's a pretty lonely bicycle rack, though we do some sustainable travel to worship efforts in the summer. And of course, right now we're all doing more sustainable travel by not traveling to worship and being online. So something more efficient and saving on some emissions that way. So other thoughts on buildings, other things that came to mind for me were things like doing an energy audit or being on top of what our thermostats are doing and making sure they're set back, which again this year is extra that way as buildings have largely been empty. Other thoughts that you want to share from your buildings?
Jim Schiebling, Faith Columbus. We converted we had a vaulted ceiling that had 300 watt incandescent bulbs in the ceiling. And the problem was to find a light source that would project the light down. And that was my job, and as a utility energy guy. And I did find some nice LED lamps that projected all light down. It changed the look of the ceiling a bit, but actually provided better light for reading the hymnal, etc. So I think the total reduction was close to 90% less wattage total. So pretty proud of it. Shopping online at closeouts saves a lot of money too. You can get bulbs that are maybe not quite the newest thing, but they are cheaper and just nearly as good.
Yeah, win-win-win, saving money,
Yeah.
better lighting, and also doing some environmental good. I celebrate it, Jim, thanks. Anybody else want to share a building success story? Okay. If you find something that you want to go back to, we can always do that too. But in the meantime, we'll go on to second category. So we did building and grounds. Here's number 2, which is worship. And for worship, I wanted to start with this coming Sunday's gospel reading. Kristen and Connie know that I missed text study. I've been missing lots of text study lately, but I missed today partly by getting ready for this. And so I figured since you were all here, I could invite you to help me with some text study. And so somebody want to unmute and read for us the John gospel reading for this week?
It's a shy group. I guess I better do it.
Thank
Gospel
you.
reading is from John chapter 10. Jesus said, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand, who is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and runs away. And the wolf snatches them and scatters them. The hired hand runs away because a hired hand does not care for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. And I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that do not belong to this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock, one shepherd. For this reason, the Father loves me, because I lay down my life in order to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it up again. I have received this command from my Father.
Thanks, Bishop Joy. So where building and grounds might feel like some of the obvious earth connection or creation care, this maybe moves to a different sort of direction, that we could wind up with Bible passages. I love that Genesis 1 and 2 are right at the start of the Bible, because there's creation care on page 1. You can't get past some of this stuff. It's so obvious in there. And there are other places where it pops up and we say, oh yeah, this one makes me think of some eco-justice. And that happens at times of the year too, where here we are right around Earth Day. And so we sort of say, ah, ding, I should talk about this stuff. But for me, I'm really insistent that because this is who God is and because this is what God is always up to, it's not something that is just sporadic. It's not only in some Bible passages, it's not only at some times of the year, but has elements and themes that we can find all the way through. So you guys are my text study crew right now. If we're looking at this gospel reading for the week, what does it have to say to us about creation care? What kinds of themes might you find in this that are connected to the earth?
I guess for me, Pastor Nick, I see a hint of ownership versus profiteering in terms of the hired hand versus the true shepherd. We're commanded to be stewards, and well, private property, you tend to take better care of your own land than you do of somebody you rented from. Maybe, I don't know if that's what you see there, but.
And I hadn't seen that, and I love it. That stewardship kind of idea and a good level of care instead of just something that's for personal advantage, maybe, huh?
Yeah, it's my assignment. Land that I've been given stewardship over for a time is mine to take care of. So it boils down to my house, how it looks and how I care for it and keep it up, or whatever. But the hired hand doesn't care.
I love it. And that's certainly a notch deeper than I was even just thinking for myself, some of the obvious part of Jesus is relying on natural imagery here, that there's something about animals that are included. And so at a very, very basic level, we would understand less about our faith if we didn't have a God who is willing to relate to animals, relate to creation. And I chose this one because I thought it made us dig a little bit deeper. Psalm 23 is on for Sunday, and that just is another of those really obvious of loaded with necessary parts of creation as we're walking beside still waters and through dark valleys and all of that stuff. Anybody else want to jump in on a John 10 comment before I click ahead?
When I think about this text, I'm reminded that David Rhodes talks about we are called to love God, love our neighbor, and love creation, and that creation is not a tack on; it's part of the love command. And we often like to look at our, metaphorically at the sheep, but the sheep are sheep, and God loves sheep. God loves the creation, and we are part of that, not above creation, but a part of creation.
Amen. Amen. Thanks, Carol.
You're welcome.
So on for some other bits of worship, here are a couple of bits from our services here at Advent last week and this coming week. We last week used our creation liturgy, which has as a litany, part of St. Francis's Canticle of the Creatures. We also know that as hymn 835 in ELW, all creatures worship God Most High. As our creedal part of worship this last week in our creation liturgy, we have the statement of faith from the explanation to the first article of the creed from Luther's Small Catechism, which when we just say, I believe in God the Father, Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, it rushes by so fast. And so Luther giving us some ways to think about what that creation means and to be able to hold that within our confessional statements in worship. And then the bottom little song, come and see what God has done. The earth is alive thanks to the sun. Every plant that grows, every river that flows, what a miracle gift of creation is part of the Earth Keeping Liturgy. It was written by Dakota Road. And so that's the shape of our worship this coming Sunday as we're bracketing Earth Day in these weeks. Besides these sort of specialized pieces, you can be finding those elements within the Apostles' Creed, as we were just saying. You can find them in your prayers within the standard order of prayers, the things that come from Sundays and Seasons, or the suggestions in the hymnal. Our second petition is always related to creation. And so in these weeks with that, we've been praying about the fire danger. We've been praying about daffodils that are coming up. We've been praying about the start of gardening here on our property. We've been praying the hope that spring brings to us for new life beginning, a sign of Easter in this time when we've been so run down and oppressed by the pandemic. Words and hymns that come to us. So lots of them that are all around us, and sometimes it's just worth noticing or highlighting them. And maybe in a moment, some of those, if you have special reflections on what those might be. But here are just a couple more glances at things from around Advent. The top panoramic picture is an outdoor worship service on Easter morning. And so that has been the little bit of worship we've been able to do in person, has been some of that outdoor around our memorial garden. At the bottom center was our Easter table. And so again, it's easy to remember that that creation is part of our worship when we've got a set of Easter flowers on the table. And I always try to cut some lilacs or things from around the property so that we've got some of the local connection with it too. You see some birch logs that are in the shape of a cross in the background, and just out of the edge of the picture is the baptismal font, and that splashing in fresh, clean water is, I think, a really easy way to remember this. The Easter Vigil has the Exultet, the prayer for lighting the Paschal candle that celebrates the work of the bees. So as we're talking about bees, that's the way that they're brought right into our worship together. There's the practice here of using Wollersheim wine when we have communion together. So looking forward to getting back to that and some local connection to right here on the earth. And maybe you think about your bulletin paper and trying to reduce that, or using recycled content paper, whatever that might be. The bottom left picture is our prayer path. Sonia Kieseberg is on the call right now. This was creation of hers as she finished her time as our administrative secretary here, and a great way to be spiritually engaged pretty directly with our grounds throughout the year. But there you see Freddie and Annalise as they were doing it for Stations of the Crosswalk on Good Friday. So thinking about those as spiritual engagement connected to creation. And then that Let All Creation Praise website, I post that there for you because I help manage that. That comes out of Lutherans Restoring Creation and has just lots of different ways to be thinking about these things and engaging them. So if you, and specifically connected to worship, blessings of solar panels are in there, just all sorts of different things. So if you are looking for something, I commend that page to you. Any other things that people want to share on worship and ways that you and your congregation attend to this and engage it and celebrate it?
Well, we've started not printing bulletins at all and just having everything on the screen. We'll send a PDF out if people want to view it on a tablet or that sort of thing. And that was pre-pandemic that was happening. I mean, it takes some getting used to for some people. Actually, many of our older members were saying that they appreciated it because they could see it better.
Yeah, great. And one of those, again, things that there are multiple reasons for doing probably. And so when you do it, you can be mindful of saying, hey, this is part of our work as stewards of creation and stewards of your offering dollars, maybe, if you're saying we're not going to have to buy paper and print, copying costs as much. So go ahead and celebrate the good that it does of stewardship and connection to creation. Be intentional about that. Anybody else? Connections or things that strike you from your worship experience, ways that in worship you've been able to feel connected to Creator and creation and the world around?
Nick, I have something I'll post a link to. I I write music with a collaborator in Adelaide, South Australia, Lee Newton, who is an active worship leader there. And so we did a song, I don't know, a year or so ago. I am the way, the truth, the life, and so the last verse of it is our creation verse. Treasure the earth and air, all creatures everywhere, Christ the all in all. I'll post that link and you can listen to it. I think I have a score to it too, if I can find the score in PDF, but I had more of a liturgical rendition of it, and Lee recorded a kind of outback Aussie version that you might like, which is up tempo with strings and his voice. So none of my voice are playing, but a lot of my influence in music, but I'll post that. You can do what you want with it.
Fantastic. Thanks, David. Which also is a great reminder. So before David spoke, I was going to say that there's some of this that always makes me feel nervous when we're gathered for worship, that here we are locked inside the walls of this building, and we look around and we think that this is a human deal. And so it makes worship into us, and maybe us and God, which, as Carol was saying, leaves out a whole enormous spread of the rest of creation. And occasionally we get reminders of that. The Thanksgiving at the table during this season ends with the words, with earth and sea and all their creatures, with angels and archangels, cherubim and seraphim, we join their unending hymn, holy, holy, holy. And so there is an occasional reminder that this chorus is a lot bigger than us who are gathered, or us who are human parts of the church, and spreads throughout creation. So one hesitant thought there, but also, as David was saying it, that there also becomes a version that says, oh, creation can be part of it, but it's still in us and them. There's a thing that we're doing, and then a creation is something that happens when you get outside. And so as David's writing music, that clearly is creation. He's part of creativity. He's part of the work of the Creator. And so not to restrict any of our lives to this. And so there's something that we miss out on by not having really incarnational presence together. But then we still have to think that even as we're staring at computer screens, this is part of God's creation and the work of the human mind that gives us internet and Zoom connections, but also whatever these components are that go into a computer screen and that keep the electricity running. Whether we want to celebrate them or whether we want to lament them, they're part of creation, and we should not cordon them off.
I was going to say, one of the things for me with the pandemic is we've been able to worship outside, which brings us right into creation. And Easter Sunday was amazing. It was a beautiful day. There were birds, there were, flowers, there were all kinds of things. And that actually, I appreciate being able to be out of the building and being in creation during worship. I think that makes a huge difference in thinking about creation. The other thing is, before the great COVID, we were going to no bulletins as well, with some weeping and gnashing. But we're moving ahead, because you know me, so.
Yeah, thanks, Connie. Weeping and gnashing, maybe the outer darkness is gathering for worship in the dark outside of the church building, and people can still find some Jesus there anyway, or Jesus can find them. Yeah, Easter morning, I keep celebrating that here. Some of our experience was that the birds were louder than the microphones on occasion. They drowned it out. And what a great thing to have that our, that always on Easter morning, it drives me a little nuts to think about St. Francis preaching to the birds, because I think the birds were probably preaching to St. Francis and to us. And so we don't need to share the good news with birds, but we'd probably do well to be listening to them.
Pastor Nick, Jim in Columbus again. We do a prayer walk in our community, pairing off, so there wouldn't be a problem with COVID necessarily. And I'm not very frightful of being outdoors, but we had stations for prayers, but just getting out and walking, with the fact that most of the time we spend in life is indoors, and it's a fate of modern life. I think we're used to conditioned spaces instead of exposing ourselves to outside, and walking with somebody is just a great way to connect, as well as with nature, and combining it with prayer stops, I think has had some good results for us. Small group, but still a good, I hope we can expand the ministry. Ecumenically, it could be good.
Yeah, fantastic. And just loads of connections there. As you talk about being out, it makes me think of breathing the air, and Jesus in John 3 talking about the wind blows where it wills, and then he connects that to the Spirit. And so something that feels like, well, when we get out and can feel a little bit of the breeze on our cheeks, we're more in contact with what the Spirit's doing, maybe perhaps thinking about that movement as your legs are going, that was talking about ways that we cordon ourselves off inside. I was ready to talk about the water of the baptismal font, and that our bread comes from wheat when we have communion, and the flowers that are there. But yeah, I think that's a beautiful part of our normal worship services, that as we're worshiping with computers, I lament that we're used to stand up, sit up, stand up, and having to use our lungs and all of that there's something about worship that is very physical in its normal place, and then we notice more when we're mobile and out and about. And yeah, just that praying for our neighbors and neighborhoods, and thinking about the houses and the trees that are around them, and the birds that are part of those trees, and yeah, all of that interaction. That's great, Jim. Thanks. I'm seeing some chats pop up. Sonia also says walking the labyrinth at MCC. There's some of that physical movement. If you can walk a labyrinth, you can have a physical activity of your body and way to engage spiritually. I also saw, Jim, you had asked earlier, what's the size of property at Advent? We've got about 7 acres here. And I meant to say early on that Advent's kind of got a special property here inside of the Madison city limits, but all of us would have our own special ways to be engaging these things, whether you have sidewalks straight all around your building, or whether you're out in the countryside and surrounded by farm fields, or whatever it might be. I'm gonna click on here to our next. So we did building and grounds, then we did worship. Here's education. And this I didn't have as much of direct slides from Advent. You see some youth in a canoe, and one of the really important things that's been part of life here for nearly 4 decades has been a high school Boundary Waters trip, and that just a huge faith formation and life formation piece for these young people. It makes me think of the phrase, we won't save what we don't love. And so that chance to be out in the wilderness for a week has been enormous for loads of youth from here. But besides that kind of outside of the classroom education, we can think about engaging with things in Sunday school. We have it as parts of curriculum, but also our Sunday schoolers get involved in planting bulbs in the spring and planting potatoes in the food pantry gardens and things like that. Some active engagement. Adult ed will hit varieties of topics, including engaging on occasion with social statements like the Caring for Creation social statement from the ELCA. In Wisconsin, the first weekend of March is always a Wisconsin Reads Leopold weekend, because it was when Sand County Almanac was said that it was going to be published. And so we do some reading from all the Leopold Sand County Almanac as we're thinking about Earth Day, and thinking that heritage connected to our Senator Gaylord Nelson, that just some of these really good and obvious local things to celebrate and return to. Leopold was 75 years ago now, and still to return to that fresh, those words continue to shape and form us a lot like our liturgy does. Lots of good movies to choose from if you want to do some of that, and including watch parties as we're in separated sorts of places. On the top left, you see the homepage for Lutherans Restoring Creation. That website has just loads and loads of stuff. If you don't know Lutherans Restoring Creation, I encourage you to give it a look. They've also got monthly gathering, webinar, chat sorts of things that are really enriching and connects you to community of folks across the ELCA. So spend some time with that. Bottom left is Interfaith Power and Light. And right now we are in Faith Climate Action Week. Always kind of the couple of weekends built around Earth Day for interfaith efforts. Some of that is preaching and worship related. Some of it is activity related. The last of Wisconsin Interfaith Power and Lights webinars is tonight. We've had 3 Tuesdays of thinking about faith, food, and climate. And so one more of those 7 o'clock tonight. You can send me a note if you want, or go to Wisconsin Interfaith Power and Light Facebook page and get some education this evening. And you could also connect with the past webinars that have already happened. Anything that anybody wants to share about education, things that have worked for you or you're finding important? Lutheran camps in the Synod we have in the comments as good ways to connect worship to nature, and yeah, super ways on faith formation to really make sure that this is integrated in our lives. Lutherdale, Crossways, Bethel Horizons, Sugar Creek. So some fabulous opportunities around in our Lutheran camps. Thanks for raising that.
We've done a boundary waters, but instead of with just youth, we've done it with men, and they bring their sons or you know, just all men's group going too. So that's another way to go with it.
And yeah, nothing that says that needs to be a youth restricted activity, and loads of other good engagement too. Okay, pressing our way onward. From education, we'll go on to public ministry. And so this one on the left, you see from LOPPW, the Lutheran Office for Public Policy in Wisconsin. Cindy Crane is a really good proponent for our Synod Caring for God's Creation team, and this has become quite a central part of her advocacy work, both on behalf of us as Lutherans in the state of Wisconsin, and also for joining our voices in connecting to government. And so we had a session last month on connecting to Governor Evers' budget proposal, which has some really strong climate things in it. He started a task force last summer to be able to come up with ways that we might engage climate within our state. And he wrote a number of those things into his budget proposal. And so really a good time right now to connect with your state legislators and say, hey, as a person of faith and somebody who cares about our environment, who cares about our farmers, who cares about the well-being of our children and future generations, I'd like for you to keep these sorts of ideas in the budget as we move forward. So you can find some more there, and on loppw.org, you can find more of those advocacy connections. Another really important push right now is along with the Biden administration's infrastructure plan and some of the really strong ways that that's looking at transportation and other infrastructure, ways that we can expand renewable energy, ways that we can be planning that are going to be caring for the future really strongly. And I think this can't be understated, that I really like to ride a bicycle, and it makes me feel daily like I'm connected to creation care, but that's functionally not saving the planet. We need some of these really big actions. Whatever we do as congregations can be important, can be part of forming who we are, can be part of really clarifying our understanding of who God is for us. But we need to engage the public sphere on this and be committed in ways that we're active about it with our government and helping change policy to make it better. Because in terms of climate change, time is not only short, it's already beyond late, and things are going to be getting worse. So I don't want to undersell this as part of what we do. On the bottom right, just a side note that it's also been exciting that government has reached back toward us, towards churches and religious groups. The Dane County governmental structure has a new set of resources for faith communities where they've reached out and said, hey, churches and other congregations, what are you up to? And what should we be sharing? What are ways that as a county we can be celebrating and encouraging this work? So a different sort of angle than what we would normally think, kind of advocacy coming back at us maybe. Also a reminder that within our synod, we've been doing this sort of work. And in 2017, we had a resolution that we passed as a synod endorsing the idea of carbon fee and dividend. And if you want a reminder or refresher on that or need to know more about it, you can be in touch with me and I can let you know. Then in 2019, we passed that on and it was approved by the church-wide assembly. So this synod here doing a lot of good work that's about really trying to influence national policy in ways that are trying to reduce the impacts of carbon in our atmosphere. Anything anybody wants to say about advocacy or about public ministry? So then our last one is mostly a wide open kind of thing. This takes us to discipleship. And as much as I wanted to state strongly the advocacy part of things and how that means we're engaging in this work, I also can't begin to understate discipleship and what it means. That there's a lot of this that we end up thinking creation care can be what we do together, that we talk about God as creator when we are in worship. We think about this as the work that we do around our buildings, and it's just enormous on the spread of it. So this takes us back to David talking about the member of his congregation who's putting some acreage into the Conservation Reserve program. This is things of not only changing light bulbs at church, but thinking about how we engage it at home. It's about all sorts of our food choices. It's about our vehicle choices, everything that we do in our purchasing decisions. It's about engagements in who we are as a society in broad ways. And so this, far from being something that leaves it to a Sunday, it's absolutely through and through all 168 hours of our week, that if we are of creation and in creation, there's nothing that we can do that's separate from this. And so it invites us to be thinking about it faithfully and as creatures and as created co-creators, and thinking about it, what it means going forward as well. So if anybody wants to say something about that vocation, or from talking lots about church things, if there's any little bit of something you want to celebrate quickly in just a couple of seconds that we have left of your discipleship related to this, you could jump in.
No need to be shy, just unmic and jump into the conversation.
And if there aren't direct things, then it leaves you a little bit more launched out into the world as Bishop Joy wraps this up. Sonia, go ahead.
Dane. Yep, Sustained Dane has offered master recycling classes. I've taken 2 of them, and I'm going to be offering at our park this coming Saturday information about recycling. As I walk around our neighborhood, I see lots of stuff in the recycling bins that don't belong there. And so that kind of raised my interest in how we make this better. And if you ever have a chance to go to Pelletary's website, they have informational video of how their recycling machines work. They're just a creation of creativity, how they sort all the stuff and put it through, but it really needs to come to them in the best way it can, without plastic bags and without other things. So yeah, so I'm sure anybody could go take their class.
Master recycler class today, and coming up there's also a composting class. And so Sonia tells us that even looking at a trash management company's website can be celebrating creation and our place in it.
After I signed up for the class, I had a nightmare that I was going around on garbage day and unpacking everybody's recycle bin and separating the stuff that goes in there and leaving in their driveway the stuff that doesn't go in there. It was awful. I thought, do I really want to take this class?
I don't know, Sonia, maybe that's like an Acts 10 sort of dream, as Peter's having this dream about all the food he's not supposed to eat that's stored on the blanket, and then it shapes the rest of his life. Maybe that was a commissioning dream you had.
Like that idea. Yeah.
My son lives in South Milwaukee, and I'd already heard about this, and it's not a new idea, but the state of Wisconsin is partnering with the federal government to encourage the installation of solar panels on residential homes. And right now the government is providing, I'm not sure what percentage it is, 26% of the installation fee, and the the installers will give the rest of, will allow you to finance the rest of the project at 1% interest, so that your monthly bill is no more than $50. And then your energy comes free. Pretty cool.
Yeah, cool. And lots of really good financing things like that on solar. Again, you can reach out to Bob Lindmeyer and hear some of the third-party financing options that help, and the focus on energy benefits that could be for your church buildings. That's also an advocacy connection right now in the state. We've been working on getting third-party financing to be okay, so that somebody else could pay for and put up panels, and then you could run them through your own rooftop. And the state law hasn't been clear on that, so that's been a push too.
Anybody else have a quick comment or question or thought?
Well, I just want to thank Nick, and Christ Lutheran Church in Lancaster is also a land-rich congregation that built on an inherited 5 acres of a horse pasture, part to make a baseball diamond, and part that's just been in perpetual care and has resisted twice now other people coming in trying to build in the park, which I admire, which wasn't because of me, but because of the congregation. And my dream would be that someone talked about it a little bit, putting the solar unit out there on that land, maybe something that tracks the sun, one of those that rotates, something that models it, for the city. That's just a dream, but we have the land for it. We're on 1.5 acres, and we've got like another 2 acres extra. Yep.
Yeah, great. Thanks, David. Loads of possibilities, loads of ideas. Some congregations are talking about putting in charging stations for electric vehicles. So, just lots of ways to be able to engage this. And as Jim wanders around the sidewalks with others from his church, he's modeling what it means to be Christian on this planet. Lots of things. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here. Thanks for celebrating in these ways. Thanks for your stewardship and creation care, for Earth Day observances, and being Christians here on this planet. And thanks to the Synod for hosting the idea of encouraging this too.
Of course, and thank you again to you, Pastor Nick, for being present, for giving us so many different avenues to approach caring for creation, and for just inspiring us to think through all of those different ways that we can invite our congregations to be caring for creation. So thank you very much. Just a quick announcement, when What Matters comes out this week, I did put a quick link into Wisconsin Council of Churches' latest thoughts about churches reopening. I've had a couple of questions this week about that, about returning to in-person, in sanctuary worship and safety guidance for that. And they did just re-update that at the end of last week. So there'll be a link to that. But of course, you're welcome to, if you haven't already, just gone directly to the Wisconsin Council of Churches website just for their latest guidance. I know some congregations are transitioning to that or have already, and some are struggling with people not wanting to now wear masks and other sort of situations. So just be aware there is updated guidance from the Wisconsin Council of Churches. And as always, thanks for joining us this afternoon. It's always really good to see you, and we will see you again real soon. So thank you very much, and God be with you this week. Thank you. Bye-bye.